Good morning. I think, Ms. McIntosh, we're ready to begin with Ms. McCluskey.
Yes, Lord, Miss McCluskey.
Morning.
Good morning, Ms. McCluskey. Now, as you understand, you're about to be asked questions by Mr. McIntosh, who's sitting opposite you. But first of all, I understand you're prepared to take the oath.
Yes.
Could I ask you, sitting where you are, to raise your right hand and repeat these words after me? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the
Thank you
truth.
very much, Ms. McIntosh. Sorry, Ms. McCluskey.
All right.
Now, I don't know how long your evidence will take, possibly much of the morning. We will take a coffee break at about 11:30, but we can take a break at any time that you would wish, or you don't need to explain why. If you want to take a break for any reason whatsoever, just give me an indication and we'll take a break. The other thing is, you seem to me to have quite a clear, strong voice, but it's very important that you're heard. The microphones are there to make sure you are heard, but if you speak maybe a little louder, a little slower than you would in conversation, that'll help everyone. Now, Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you, my lord. Miss McCluskey, I wonder if we can take your full name.
Fiona Jane McCluskey.
Now, you explained to my colleagues earlier that you recently had a respiratory infection and
That's
prone to
correct.
coughing. So if at any point you feel you're about to launch into coughing and you want to have a short break, just put your hand up and let us know. I also understand that you're slightly taking a lot of lozenges at the moment.
Yes.
And we're quite fine with that. So we'll try and keep them off the YouTube edit as we go.
All right. Thank you.
But did you produce a statement for the inquiry based on a questionnaire?
Yes, I did.
Are you willing to adopt that as part of your evidence?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, what I wanted to do is focus on a job you held, according to your statement, as Senior Nurse Advisor for the New South Glasgow Hospital Project. What years did you do that job?
I started in post on the 1st of April 2009. Initially, the job was a 2-year secondment opportunity. So I was seconded out of an operational management role.
So are you looking at your own statement at the moment?
Yeah.
Yes. It's easy if you don't look at it.
All right. Okay.
Just put it to one side. If you need it, then
All right,
let me know.
okay.
But and then when did you finish the job?
I left the post on the 30th of June 2015.
So that would have been, what, 4 months after handover and just as migration was finishing?
The migration programme was completed. I can't exactly remember the date, but it was at the very end of the York Hill transfer. I think I was there for approximately 2 weeks post that, and then I was redeployed through the organisational change policy into another job.
And then eventually did you come to retire from NHS Greater Glasgow in 2017?
I did, yes, in March.
Now, you said it was a secondment post for 2 years. You wouldn't be able to help us understand why a job of this sort was 2 years when the project was clearly going to last longer than that?
Okay, initially they were looking for a senior nurse to come into the project to assist with the competitive dialogue and design process. And during that period, having discussions with the project director, Mrs. Seaborn, and my professional lead, who at the time was Mr. Farrelly, who was acute nurse director. Between the three of us, we agreed that because of the size of the project and the input that I could give from a nursing perspective, it would be beneficial for me to remain in the project. Normally what happens in the NHS is secondments only usually last for a couple of years due to contractual arrangements and also sometimes people want to go back to their original post or move on elsewhere. So I agreed to stay on until the project was completed.
Thank you. If we think about the 6 years or so you were in the project, from your point of view, does it divide up into any obvious sort of phases or blocks in terms of what you were doing?
Well, when I started in the project in the April 2009, we were entering a phase called competitive dialogue. So that was where the bidders who had were competing for the contract were coming in, and we went through that phase. Then went through the design period. After that period of time, the focus of my post changed fairly significantly, because we started the look ahead to Service Day 1 operational commissioning. So I was asked by the project director to work with the project doctor, Dr. Stephen Gallagher, to start to commence the planning for clinical migration, which was a subset of the overall commissioning.
So your
plan.
main work was the competitive dialogue and then migration?
Yeah, well, yes, I was involved in the user group meetings.
Is that a middle phase between the two?
Yes, yes.
Right. Is there a clear boundary there, or is it just this
I think there's an overlap.
Right.
You know, there was a clear boundary between competitive dialogue and the design, but I think when the design was being completed, it's sort of the job focus then changed.
Now, you gave us a copy of your job description,
Yes,
and we actually also got it from somewhere else.
right.
I wonder if you could look at Bundle 43, Volume 6, Document 49 at page 1024. And this is the version we think that Mary McLeod sent to the Edinburgh team in 2013 when they were setting up their project. No, it's
Yes.
not. It's a bit. Yes. Is this the? You had a chance to look at this in advance. Is this similar to the one you provided us, or?
Yes.
Right. I wondered if we could go on to the second page or the next page, and it describes the project. And then on the third page, there's a flow chart. So, could you, using this as an aid, could you describe to whom you reported?
On a day-to-day basis, it was, as you can see, a very flat structure that we had. On a day-by-day basis, for example, during the user group meetings, I would be reporting to either Mary McLeod, the children's project manager, or Heather Griffin, the adult project manager. Anything that happened during those meetings, you know, I'd feed back. For other work flows and other pieces of work would be given to me by the project director.
That's Mr. Seaborn.
Mr. Seaborn. So in essence, I was reporting on a day-by-day basis, although it was more of a collegiate
I appreciate
we
that.
worked in. I was accountable to Alan Seaborn.
Did you have anything to do with the board's external advisors in any part of the project?
When I started in the project in April 2009, we had Curry and Brown, who were our technical advisors. And we also had Buchan Associates, who were the healthcare planners. Those were the two.
Did you deal with a firm of architects?
HLM, I understand, were the architects who helped with the exemplar design, but that was really before I started. They were in the background as such. To be honest, at that particular time, I dealt more with Buchan Associates, the healthcare planners.
Did you deal with a company called Wallace Whittle at any point?
Not directly,
Not
no.
directly. Now, could you remember the last time you would have dealt with Buchan Associates?
I think they stepped back from the project after competitive dialogue. They certainly weren't involved in the user group meetings directly, but I think they were used at some point, although I can't really remember why we asked them. They were brought in to help with some of the user group meetings.
I was thinking about your description of Curry and Brown as the technical advisors.
Uh-huh.
Why do you describe them as such?
Well, that was what I understood Curry and Brown to be.
Who were their main staff members you dealt with?
It was David Hall, Mr. Hall.
I happen to know what Mr. Hall's professional background is, do you?
No.
No. And what sort of input did you observe him having in, say, 2010?
Well, 2010 was the design period where we were heavily involved in the user group meetings. So I was present at, I think, if not all adult meetings and children's meetings, apart from maybe annual leave, perhaps. David Hall was present at all of the meetings. And if he wasn't there, there would be another member of staff from Curry and Brown who would step in for him, but I can't remember who that was.
What was it about the work that Mr. Hall was doing that would encourage you to think that Curry and Brown were technical advisors?
Well, if there was an issue regarding, trying to think, if we were in a meeting and perhaps a user might say, what is the lighting going to be like in here, or how's the heating going to work, he would perhaps be able to answer that. Or if I was asked I would be going out at periods of time throughout the project to speak to nurses, in the main, doctors. It was a PR process, basically, going out and saying to people, we're moving into this lovely new hospital, this is the way we're going to work. And folk would say to me things like, what's the square meterage in the hospital? What are the ceilings going to look like? What's the lighting going to be like? I was asked once about a sedum roof. Don't know anything about that. I was asked about the SUDS scheme, that's underwater drainage system. So those kind of questions, I would be honest with people and say, look, I don't know the answer, but I'll go and find out. And I would go back to the project team, and it would be David that would maybe not be able to answer that directly, but he would find out the information and come back.
See, and because you've given an interesting range of things that you would have taken back to David.
Yes.
I wonder if there's some other ones I can put to you. And
right.
This is, I suppose, a bit of a memory test. So we've heard evidence about heating provided by radiant panels in ceiling roofs. Would you have had questions about that you can remember?
I don't recall being asked about a radiant panel.
When was the first time you heard about the concept of a chilled beam?
I don't remember ever been told about the word chilled beam until quite late on in the project, although at the very beginning we were told that it would be a mechanically ventilated building. We wouldn't be able to open the windows, which for me, I suppose, was quite a relief because I was a bit anxious about patients falling out of windows from the 11th floor.
Well, indeed.
I don't actually remember, probably till maybe later on.
Can you try and give us some idea of when later on is?
I think that would probably be during the design period, perhaps 2010, 2011. I didn't know about chilled beams away at the beginning.
No, I mean, the reason I ask is because, well, if I ask a different question to perhaps illustrate the problem, let's imagine you're in a user group meeting and it's one of those wards where there are either infectious patients or patients who are immunocompromised in some ways. And one of the clinicians or the managers starts asking questions about ventilation. Now, first question is, do you remember that ever happening during the design process?
Not in the user group meetings.
Not in the user group. Was there ever an occasion when you were in a user group meeting when ventilation was discussed?
I don't recall.
Now, what I want to do now is to put to you something. Take this off the screen. Sorry. So one of the matters that Mr. Hall has explained in his statement and has been put to the inquiry by Carrie and Brown is that in the short period after contract closed, after the contract was signed, Carrie and Brown stood down their technical team, comprising Buck and Associates, HLM, and Wallace Whittle. Were you aware of any such change?
I don't recall being aware of that. I do remember being told by Mr. Seaborn that the healthcare planners would no longer be required.
And that would be Buck and Associates.
They'd done their part of the process.
Can you help us identify who was around in the project providing technical advice to the project team about water and ventilation after the start of 2010?
We did have I wasn't involved in the laboratory project and the design of that, apart from a piece of work I did at the end regarding enhancing the environment for the paediatric mortuary. But there was a member of staff, Alistair.
Could it be Alistair Smith?
Yes, that's right. Now, he, I think, was brought in because he had experience in electrical systems. He was the HV, high voltage advisor. That was my understanding, because next to the laboratory building, there was a big energy centre, which I was never inside that, but apparently it's
very big.
It's big. It's got enough energy there to support a small town, which basically the campus is like a small town. So Alistair was around for that, and I think he gave some advice during the checking of the room data sheets, although I don't actually know what he did. Later on in the project, Mr. Powrie joined the team, although...
Before we go to Mr. Powrie, can we just check something with Mr. Smith? Do you have any recollection of when he might have arrived?
No, sorry, I can't.
Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Powrie then. You were just telling us about Mr. Powrie.
Yeah, Mr. Powrie was an estates manager at Glasgow Royal Infirmary, and I knew Mr. Powrie vaguely because I'd worked there many years before.
What advice did he give?
So he was brought in to do the work for operational commissioning round about all the technical systems that were going to have to be started up, the stuff that in behind the ceilings or whatever.
So the lights, the pipes,
yeah,
the water.
All the works that would need to be done for maintenance, etc. So he had, I know, some interest in water systems. I don't know if he was trained in water systems, but he had an interest in.
Is there anybody else you can think of who was providing technical advice that you came across?
I thought that we had a company called Wallace Whittle in the background somewhere, but
could you have heard Wallace Whittle's name after 2013?
I think there was some discussion with infection control about ventilation, and there was a query about, I can't remember the date, I think it's in the pack.
I think it is in my notes somewhere to show to you.
It was round about MDR-TB, which is methicillin drug-resistant TB. Now, I'm not an expert in infection control. I don't have any qualifications in that. But there was a concern about the isolation rooms being able to take this patient group. Now, originally, the hospital was not designed to accommodate that group of patients because they would be accommodated in what we called the Brownlee Centre, which was the infectious diseases unit. So at that point, I think Mr. Loudon contacted Wallace Whittle for some advice. Could this have been in
2013 or something like that?
I think it would be around about then. I can't remember. Honestly, I can't remember the date. The only reason I remember about that was because we were asked, Stephen Gallagher and I were asked by the infection control team to look at the pathways for bringing patients from the emergency department through the hospital up to the critical care unit, because these patients are really very ill. And also the MERS patients, MERS, don't ask, can't remember what that stands for, but these are the patients that are nursed. I think it's the Royal London that take them.
Could it be? No,
So-
sorry, that's not it. Keep going. Sorry, I interrupted.
So sorry, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but there is. I'm trying to get to the end of it. We were asked to look at how the patients would be accommodated and how the flow would work. So we were able to show where the patients would be taken in, how they would be received, how they'd be transferred. And then the question came up, are these rooms going to be acceptable for these patients? And the question went back to Mr. Loudon, who I think contacted Wallace Whittle at that point for the advice. So I think they were still involved in the background then, as far as I know.
Do you know who Wallace Whittle was working for at that point?
No.
Because were you aware that Wallace Whittle was then working for Multiplex?
No.
No. Okay. What I want to do now is to ask you a little bit about the roles of Mr. Moyer, Miss Griffin, and Miss McLeod as project managers. Had you worked with any of them before?
Yes, I worked with Mrs. Griffin, Heather, on a project at Glasgow Royal Infirmary. Now, I can't remember the date. It'll be in my CV. We worked on the reconfiguration of medical services in Glasgow Royal Infirmary. I was a project manager for a short period of time because I'd finished in a post in another project and was sort of in a hiatus, and my board director of nursing at the time placed me in with the project management team until another post came up that would be suitable for me to go into. So I worked with Heather for, I think, maybe 4 months.
Could this have been in 2003, according to your CV?
Yes, yes.
And what I wanted to understand is, starting with Mr. Moyer,
Yes.
what did you understand his role to be?
Well, Mr. Moyer was the head of major projects for NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. In the project, he was known as a deputy project director, and that came out of the Gateway 1 review, I think.
Would this have been in February 2010? There was a... Or
Yes,
earlier than that?
I think, no, I wouldn't have known what happened earlier than that. And my understanding was that Peter was an architect by background, although I may be wrong. He had the technical expertise to be able to lead on a project from a technical point of view. I don't know, what other qualifications he had, but he'd been involved in a lot of capital projects in the past.
When you come to Miss Griffin and Miss McLeod, I think you might have watched Miss McLeod's evidence yesterday.
I did, yes.
There seems to be a possible two different ideas of what a project manager is.
Right.
There was the one that Miss McLeod was explaining to us, and then there is perhaps one that people in the construction sector would see.
Yes.
What did you see her role was?
I think I saw her role as being the lead for the user group meetings. Obviously, they'd done some background preparatory work for the exemplar design of the hospital, and she'd instigated the clinical output specs. But when I came onto the project, Mary was, I suppose, in a lead and a coordinating role. So anything that was to happen within the Children's Hospital project, Mary would have to know about it. Now, Mary might not have been able to answer the questions on technical, but would know the person to go to or get the information. So if anything came up, for example, I'll use example of Sedum Roof again, I'd go back and say, I've been asked this question about ceiling roof or the children's play area in the hospital. What would you like me to do about that? And she would say, find out, get the advice from X person, and then let me know.
So you just said that anything would involve the hospital would come through her. That doesn't seem to be the position she had
Right.
yesterday.
Okay.
Because she seemed to take the view that she was only focusing on adjacencies and user matters and managing expectations, and that technical matters were nothing to do with her at all. What's your comment on that?
I would say I would agree with that, that technical matters, she would, I think the structure in the project team was set up when we went in to start the process off, and like many jobs, they evolve. When we moved into the, I suppose, the implementation phase with Brookfield Multiplex, we were subdivided into groups, and there were technical groups, M&E, medical planning, commissioning. I think there is a diagram somewhere, I did notice it on the web, where there are names attached to different groups. So there would be people with the necessary experience sitting on the technical or construction interface group, whereas Mary and Heather and I would be more in the medical planning type of work.
Would you have expected the project managers, Miss Griffin and Miss McLeod, to, if not been able to resolve technical matters, to at least know they exist?
I would have thought so.
What I want to do now is to take you back to your statement, and it's question 3C we answered for you, and ask you, and it's quite a long way into your statement, because you very helpfully answered question 1 at great length with your own numbering system. So if we go over to 3C, which is page 319, and we asked you to describe your involvement in the design of the Italian unit, PPVL and BMT rooms. Now, the reason I wanted to ask you about this was to get from you your understanding of the process. And what you seem to be describing here, at the bottom of this page, is a process which involves the user groups and then them feeding into the architect.
Yes.
And then over the page, on the next page, then a plan being shown to the user groups and a sequence of meetings by which the design is evolved.
Correct.
Now, what I wonder understand is, would the question of what sort of isolation rooms they were to be have come up in those meetings?
I think we didn't discuss the technical aspects of the rooms, but my understanding was that in that ward, the rooms would be positive pressure.
So we can take that off the screen. I wondered if you could help me out, because I may have got this wrong, but I understand there are 3 types of isolation rooms. There are negative pressure rooms, there are positive pressure rooms, and there are positive pressure ventilated lobby rooms.
Yes.
Which one did you understand that those isolation rooms were supposed to be?
I don't. Well, it would be there were positive pressure rooms in the adult critical care unit that had
yes.
lobbies, but I think they were different to the spec that was going to be given to the Ward 2A, although I'm not absolutely sure on that.
No, but what I wanted to understand is, are you saying the rooms in 2A were supposed to be positive pressure rooms,
Yeah.
or positive pressure ventilated lobby rooms?
I don't know.
Because one of the things that has emerged in 2015, is that it appears to be the case that the rooms that were fitted, positive pressure ventilated lobby rooms, were considered not to be suitable for the patients and had to be adjusted. Now, and eventually, of course, 2A was ripped out entirely. Can you help us about how it was that the isolation rooms in Ward 2A, the BMT rooms, came to be PPVL rooms?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that because I wasn't involved.
I'd like to show you an email from you, well, email exchange is better putting it, between you and Mr. Mike Baxter of the Scottish Government. So this is from the 10th of August 2010. It's Bundle 14, Volume 1, page 16. Now, at the top of the email, we have his response to you. In the bottom of the page, we have an email from you, which says, Mike, so I'm assuming you would have seen, you knew Mr. Baxter at this point. You met him in meetings and things. And what role did he play in the project?
He sat at Scottish Government and I think it was the Health Department, but I can't really remember. He came through fairly regularly to meet with Mr. Seaborn on a range of issues. I was never involved in any of the meetings.
But anyway,
I can't tell you.
You've been asked, you say, Alan Seaborn asked me to forward to you the paper outlining the reasons behind the proposed configuration of the critical care unit in the new South Glasgow Adult Hospital. I look forward to your comments. And over the page, we find a paper, page 17, describing the critical care unit, and that continues on to page 18, and then page 19, there's a image. Now, I wondered, we put this on your documents, who was the author of the paper, if we go back to 17, that you sent? Who wrote the paper?
I wrote the paper with Stephen Gallagher, who was the medical director.
Medical director. So this would be, in a sense...
Sorry, I didn't quite get that answer. You wrote the paper together with Dr. Gallagher?
I did, yes.
Thank you.
So this is a clinical paper in the sense that you're the nursing lead and he's the medical lead?
Yes.
Right. And what did you understand was the reason this paper was needed?
Okay, I'll try and make this short.
Of course.
The configuration of the intensive care units at the admitting sites was going to be
So this is the older site?
The old sites was very different from what was proposed within the new hospital. During the exemplar design, that was before the 100% single room CEL came out.
That came from the Scottish Government?
That came from the Scottish Government, saying that all new hospitals were to be built with 100% single rooms. During the exemplar design, I wasn't involved, but my understanding was that there'd been an incredible amount of work done with the clinical users to reach an agreement about a design which was an open plan, cubicled type of design.
Do we actually see that on the second page of paragraph 2.5? There's a sort of staff issue.
So really, to put it into context, I'll give you an example. In the Southern General Hospital, in the general intensive care unit, I'm not talking about the neurology intensive care or coronary care. This is purely the intensive care unit. The unit itself was probably smaller than the size of this room, and it contained, I think, 6 beds. There were 5 in the open bays and 1 in a side room. The intensivist, the doctor, could literally stand in the middle of the room and see all of the patients. For them to move from that kind of environment to 100% single rooms in a 79-bedded unit was, I think, a step too far for them. So when we were going through the design period, we reached an impasse between the project team and the users. We brought in external
Sorry,
consultants.
between the project team and,
The user group,
right,
sorry.
thank you.
We brought in a healthcare planning company, I think it was Tribal at the time, and really I suppose to hold the coats as much as anything, to try and reach a resolution. And we were very quickly running out of time because we were running up to full business case. The hospital was being planned, the money was being discussed, etc. in the background. I didn't have anything to do with that. And essentially, we agreed that we'd look at what's happening elsewhere. So this is a short paper. By no means it's a research-based paper. It was just what was happening at the time and how could we get from one solution to something that would fit for everyone. The clinical users, the intensivists, the doctors, the senior nurses were adamant they would not move to 100% single room. So if they wouldn't move, we couldn't open the hospital. You need the doctors and nurses there to look after the patients. So with the users, ourselves, infection control, we looked at what we could achieve within a solution. And we then had a meeting with the chief executive, Jane Grant, at the time. There is a minute of that meeting. And it was agreed that we would move to a split of open bays with, initially it was to bay glass, but we moved to plasterboard walls between with curtained fronts, and a proportion of isolation rooms, which infection control were round the table and agreed on. So we had to have a derogation for that, and Alan asked if Stephen and I, Mr.
A derogation from the national policy.
Yes. So we were asked to write this paper, and it was sent to Mike Baxter, and that was how we arrived at that.
Thank you. The reason I asked this question was twofold. One, because could I ask who was there representing infection control in these discussions?
Sandra McNamee and Tom Walsh.
So Mr. Walsh gave evidence, if I can recollect it correctly, in the hearing last year, that the infection control nurses in the IPC team have no expertise in ventilation systems.
Yes.
Was there no involvement from an infection control doctor?
I don't recall an infection control doctor being present at those meetings. However, Sandra McNamee was the Assistant Director of Nursing for NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, had a huge amount of experience and was the clinical lead as such for the nursing staff. I am sure, but not certain, but I'm sure she would have discussed that with Craig Williams.
The other question that I wanted to ask you is, you've described, and I think I'm cutting this very short, quite a rigorous process in which, in order to decide to derogate from a national policy or guidance, you went through a process, you got consultants in, you had meetings, you end up writing a paper, and you send it, if we can go back to page 16, to the Deputy Director, Capital Planning Asset Management at the Scottish Government Health Department effectively for approval.
Yes.
Are you aware of whether any similar process took place either for the isolation rooms in Ward 2A or for what were eventually the bone marrow treatment rooms in Ward 4B in the Tower?
At the very beginning of when I was involved in the project, we had a meeting with Sandra McNamee, I think Tom Walsh, Heather Griffin, Pamela Ioannidis, Annette Rankin. Now, I don't know if Dr. Redding was at that meeting, but she had contributed to a paper, and they agreed how many isolation rooms would be required for the hospital for both hospitals. We didn't make that up ourselves. We asked the infection control team
I'm just
for
going to
their
try and
advice.
find the minutes of that meeting, which I know I have somewhere. And it's entirely possible that someone listening next door will send me a message telling me where it is. But you allow me a moment just to do that. And that process would have defined the effectively the specification you were working to.
At that stage, I think I can't remember the detail of the meeting, but it was more around patient activity and what would be required. For example, in the adult hospital, in the main tower, it was agreed we'd have a certain set of rooms for patients who had respiratory viruses, for example, so they would need a negative pressure room. And it was agreed that they would be put into the respiratory ward. So anybody with it was really a high risk case, would be put in there into those types of rooms. I don't think at that point in time we'd got to the stage where the technical work was being done, but that was done at a slightly later
Could
stage.
this have been a meeting in 2009?
Yes, it was very shortly after I joined the project, to be honest.
I think I'm going to find it, but I
May,
think it might take me a moment.
the end of April, beginning of May. It was prior to competitive dialogue because we needed that information because the bidders were asking for that.
I'll come back to that if you don't mind. I need to show it to you. But what we'll do is we'll move on to something else, and I'll pick it up in the coffee break. Can I ask you to look at an email from the 21st of October 2010, that from you to what was then Jackie Stewart, now Jackie Blarmanroy, on bundle 17, document 79, page 3032. Yes, so this appears to be an email from you to Francis Rath. And it is forwarding on an email from Dr. Hood, later Professor Hood. Now, and he's discussing a conversation with Mr. Hoffman in England. Now, is this about the use of the ventilation system of the renal dialysis area?
Yes, it looks like that from the email.
Yeah. Why would you be organising this process?
I think, if I can remember correctly, and it might be on the next page because I had a look at this email. I think Jackie was on annual leave. So
yes,
what would happen in a situation like that? For example, if I'd gone on annual leave, there might be a piece of outstanding work that I'd pass to another member of the project team. So if it was a technical issue, I would, I'd pass it on, or I would let Mary or Heather know. And in my out of office, I would put up who was put for any urgent queries to contact this person. So I think Jackie was on annual leave. And I think we were coming to a point in time where we needed that information fairly quickly. So I contacted Professor Hood to see if we could get the information back.
What I wondered is, why was it necessary, as you say in your email, top of this page, at page 3033, on the 21st of October 10, for you to get information about the renal dialysis outpatient area for the full business case?
I think I've already said that was information that had been requested. Jackie must have been asked to get that information, and she was on annual leave, so that's how I get involved in that email.
No, I just wondered whether the thing you introduce in the email, tracing email you send, is the mention that it's required the full
Full business
business case, because
case.
she doesn't say that in her email. And I wonder where you got that information from.
Perhaps I can't remember it. I can't.
Because the
it
odd
must have,
thing
it
is
must have
that-
been for that. I wouldn't have put that in the email if I hadn't been told that.
No, indeed.
But
The
I
reason I
can't
mention
remember,
this is
sorry.
because the ventilation of the renal dialysis area is not discussed in the full business case.
Right.
And the one thing that isn't discussed in the full business case is the decision not to follow the ventilation guidance for the single rooms. Can you help us why people wanted to know the ventilation standard of renal dialysis for the full business case?
No.
No. Now, I'd like to turn to Ms. Stewart, and she's giving evidence this afternoon, and you were effectively her line manager in some senses.
Yes, that's true. When Jackie came into the project, it was felt that she should sit, I suppose, with me as a nurse. And in terms of, at that point in time, in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, I think it's the same now. I was her direct report. She would, for annual leave, objective setting, that sort of thing. But for anything regarding infection control, she had her professional lead, who was Sandra McNamee, the Assistant Director of Nursing.
I wonder if you can look at the document that was prepared in 2014 by, I think, Mr. Walsh. It's in lots of different places, but the version we'll take is Bundle 27, Volume 8, Document 3. I think it's at page 37 is the cover email. Yes. And Mr. Walsh is sending this email to the medical director, amongst others, in 2014 regarding IPCT input into the new hospital. And Mr. Loudon has sent an email beyond that. And then the next page is more discussion. Do you see how on the 29th of July 2014, Mr. Walsh says to David Loudon, the commissioning of the new Southern General Hospital was discussed at the Board Infection Control Committee yesterday. The IPC team have been and are engaged in a number of groups advising on aspects of the new build through liaison between you and Ms. McNamee. And he expresses the view that they're keen to be involved in the ongoing and future commissioning of the facilities. Do you remember these emails?
Yes.
Yes. Can you go to the next page? There is a paper. Now, did you read the paper when it was first produced in October 2014?
I wrote the paper.
You wrote the paper. So, one of the things that I'm intrigued about is it appears to be describing a high level of involvement of IPC in the design process.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've explained in your answer, in your statement, I won't go to it, but effectively you've described your working relationship with Ms. Barmanroy, how you were her manager for annual leave and other purposes, and how she would seek advice at the weekly IC lead nurse meetings.
Yes.
Which we have minutes of some of them. And she would seek technical advice from Sandra McNamee and Dr. Williams.
Correct.
Now, one thing that concerns me, and I'm going to put it to her this afternoon, is that Miss Stewart, as she then was an infection control nurse. And Mr. Walsh has been very careful to say that infection control nurses have no specialism in ventilation. I think possibly Anak Rankin had acquired some, but he's quite clear about that. And Miss Stewart, Miss Barmanroy, is very, very clear that she doesn't have that expertise. If an issue arose in the project that engaged something that's out with her experience, particularly in ventilation, how would she know that it was important enough to raise with somebody else?
Okay, if I do know that Jackie did have multiple conversations and meetings with Dr. Williams regarding the technical requirements for ventilation for the hospital. She'll be able to elaborate on that herself because I wasn't involved in those meetings. There are some email trails around about that. So essentially anything that went on behind the roof tiles or behind the walls, how the plant worked and stuff like that, would be out with Jackie's sphere of competence. She was very, very heavily involved in a whole raft of projects within the hospital during the design period, during when we were picking components, picking vinyl for the floors, ensuring that anything that was put into the hospital could be cleaned using the correct dilution of disinfectants or whatever. She was very heavily involved in the procurement of the furniture that went into the patient bedrooms, because there's a standard for that. Sanitary fittings, sanitary wear, the types of clinical wash hand basins used, the tabs. So in her role, in an effect, and I don't want to overstep my sphere of knowledge because Jack will be able to tell you this much better in the afternoon, but she was anything that you could see within the patient environment. Jackie would have day-to-day interest and responsibility for that.
How would she know that there was something in a drawing or a data sheet that she was being asked to check that was not in compliance with guidance?
Specifically, what are you asking
So
for?
let's imagine that she's looking at a room data sheet, either a example one or the ultimate ones, or she's looking at a drawing and they show, because you can see it on the drawing, the type of ceiling or the type of ventilation. And if you know a little bit about ventilation, you know those are wrong. How would she know that that's the moment when she should speak to Craig Williams?
I think you would need to ask her that.
Well, the reason I'm asking you is because you're her line manager.
Right.
And so I am concerned that a response she might give this afternoon is, I was just doing my job, and therefore she was put in that position where she's asked to be the IPC liaison, and yet she's got to assess issues that are out with her skills. Now, isn't that not something you don't really do with nurses?
That would be out with the NMC Code of Conduct, and I'm sure she wouldn't have stepped over that line.
It's about you as her manager.
Okay.
You've got someone you're managing who is effectively being the gatekeeper to an area of technical issues that she doesn't have skills in. As a manager, as a nursing manager, are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely not. She wouldn't have been checking ceiling. When we were undertaking the user group meetings, we had, for each department, you have something called a schedule of accommodation, which details all the rooms within the department. When we got to the user group meetings, we would be presented with what the architects call a 1-50 layout. So that's the floor plan. And the walls, it's like I suppose a collapsed-in doll's house.
You could fold it up and make a little model.
Yeah, so what we would be looking at within there is, from an infection control point of view, she didn't get into us. I think when you by road, this is where the clinical wash hand basin must
I understand
go,
that bit.
And
in that room data sheet, it will have a row in which, depending whether if it's a normal room, it'll have a row which describes the ventilation as 40 litres a second. Now, how is Jackie Barmanroy supposed to know that that's a clue? And if you go behind that, you'll find a derogation, which is a non-compliance, with Scottish Government guidance. How is she supposed to know that if it's not in her areas of competence?
She wouldn't have been asked to check that.
But how does Professor Williams get involved then?
I think I think that would have been probably kind of separate meeting as such about with the technical advisors from Multiplex about how the ventilation system in its totality would work. When we came to checking the room data sheets, I can't remember how many rooms are in the hospital, 9,000 or whatever, I don't know. We were asked, Peter Moore asked all of the team to assist Frances. It was an onerous task. There's no way that one person could have checked every single data sheet in that hospital. So we were asked if we would review the room data sheets, but not the technical part. I specifically went to Peter Moore and said, I'm not comfortable doing this. I don't have a technical qualification, and I know for a fact that Jackie would have done the same thing. So we were only asked to check the floor plan. Have we got an oxygen outlet there in this room? Have we got a suction outlet? Have we got enough power points in that room in the critical care unit? Are the pendants there? We didn't work through the placement, but is there a pendant there that should be there? Is there anything missing? But we were not asked to check the technical side because as nurses, we have not got that level of skill or competence.
So the thing that concerns me, and I'll put it to you because I think it's the context of this, is that we know that at the time, Professor Williams had 5 sessions a week allocated to be the lead infection control doctor. Are you aware of what system existed to ensure that ventilation matters for all these rooms, these 9,000 rooms, were drawn to his attention?
I can't answer that.
Are you aware of there being a system?
I don't know.
Right. The other question is, I'll put it to Mrs. Barnroy this afternoon, is that she signed, I think, I'll have to check her signature, but I think it's her signature, the Stage 2 HI scribe for the hospital.
Yes.
It expresses views on ventilation matters. Do you have any recollection of her being asked to do that?
I recall when Jackie came on to the project, we had a team meeting. It was a presentation on HCI Scribe because of the importance of it. And Jackie said that we need to undertake an HCI Scribe for the demolition works that were being undertaken on the site because we had high-risk patients in the haematology unit next to that unit. But I'm not particularly familiar with the process for HCI Scribe. I think at that point in time it was done online. So I really don't know, or I can't really remember what she would have done. But I do know that was completed.
You're comfortable with an infection control nurse signing an HI Stage 2 HI Scribe for a entirely new hospital?
I think if we look back at the way we worked, and maybe I didn't make this completely clear at the beginning, we worked in a hub and spoke model. So if we're talking about myself as a nurse, I had a group called the Generic Ward User Group, who I would go to if I had any queries. For example, we had queries about the initial door design, which I was very unhappy with. Jackie, her backup initially, she would go to the weekly infection control lead nurse meeting. If it was something that they felt they couldn't help her with or answer, she would take that to Sandra McNamee at the senior management team meeting. So I think from that point of view, that's where the backup for Jackie came from. I don't think she was signing it all on her own. I don't think she would have done that, on her own as such. She would have done that with the support of her infection control senior colleagues.
Yes, I'm just wondering. Well, I'll ask her. Let's move on. I think we found the document you were referring to, the meeting from early 2009. It's Bundle 14, Volume 1, Document 3, page 75. So would this be the meeting you were talking about just after you arrived in the team?
Yes.
Now, if I recollect what you said a few moments ago, is that this set out the requirements for isolation rooms for the entire hospital. So let's just see what we have here. So we have attendees as you've described, Mr. Walsh, Ms. Griffin, Dr. Gallagher, you, Ms. Rankin, Ms. McNamee, and Ms. Ioannidis. And do we see that it's only the New South Glasgow Adult Hospital?
Yes, because it was a meeting about the adult hospital.
Was there a meeting you were involved in for the Children's Hospital?
I don't recall.
And we look at the, it does say the group reviewed a paper produced by Drs. Redding, Hood, and Annette Rankin. Now, Dr. Redding and Ms. Rankin both remember they might have made a paper. We can't find a copy, and we can't ask Dr. Hood, Professor Hood, as he's not well.
Okay.
But maybe it doesn't matter what the paper says because we have the conclusions. And the following was agreed as the final interaction control position. Isolation rooms for the New South Glasgow Hospital are as followed. Hemato-oncology, sealed ward with HEPA filtration positive to the rest of the hospital. Now, is that the position that was being implemented prior to the change to bring in the adult BMT?
That was my understanding.
Okay. Respiratory, 3 negative pressure sealed rooms without anti-rooms, and then it lists the rest. And we go on the next page. And then we have a further list, critical care, renal dialysis, day beds, and then hemato-oncology, day beds are planned. And on the next page, we have the end of the meeting. Now, that's in May 2009. Were you aware of any subsequent meeting to change those specifications before authorization to proceed?
No, I can't recall.
Can I show you a document which was a project manager's instruction from June 2010? So that's Bundle 16, Document 24, page 1674. I wonder if you'd seen this before you put it in your bundle. So this is PMI 370. And you see that its description is alteration to board requirements for M&E services, and the title is PMI General 021 Hemato-oncology Ward. Had you seen this before we put it in the bundle?
No.
No. If we look at the instruction, the board confirmed that 8-number single rooms no longer require HEPA filter air supply as originally specified. The current Nightingale layout reflects the board's requirement for room split between hemato-oncology beds and the remainder of the ward. Please provide an indication for the cost saving to remove the additional filtration to the 8-number rooms and en-suites. Now, were you aware of a decision to remove HEPA filters from part of this ward?
No.
Was it a Nightingale ward?
I think the statement Nightingale layout, perhaps, when I read that, I was wondering, would that be a Nightingale layout, as in, the bed, the beds would be up the sides of the wards, or is Nightingale referring to the architect's layout?
Yes, I do wonder that too, but
I
we'll
think
leave
it's
that
quite
unsaid.
confusing, but I don't know that the first
But
time
you
I
didn't
saw
see
it,
this at the time?
No.
No, okay. We take this off the screen. Now, in your statement, page 327, we asked you about something that we have understood. This is your answer to question 9, about the removal of the maximum temperature variant. And you explained you had no involvement in the removal of the maximum temperature variant, which wasn't quite what we asked you. What was your understanding of the removal of the maximum temperature variant? I mean, did you know it had been removed?
No.
No. Do you know what it is?
No.
if I mention a bit, does it trigger anything? A suggestion that the maximum temperature should not exceed 26 degrees is the version that they eventually went with, and the maximum temperature variation was 28 degrees as the top temperature. Does that trigger any memories? No. Okay. Let's go on to 10. You explained no involvement in technical matters. Over the page, if we jump forward to page 331, paragraph 15, we talk about something called a derogation agreed in respect to the ventilation system and the requirement to achieve air changes in compliance with SHTM. Now, that probably wasn't the clearest question we could have asked you. So I'll sort of expand on it and see if you're still happy with your answer. So we understand that in December 2009, as part of the final few days before contract close, an agreement was reached that rather than deliver 6 air changes an hour to single rooms, the building would deliver 40 litres a second to the single rooms. And there seems to be a paper about it, and we'll have more evidence, I'm sure, from Mr. Seaborn and others about how it happened. But it ends up being reflected in a contract document called an M&E clarification log. So that's what we were asking you about. Is that what you're talking about in your answer?
The M&E clarification.
Or this change, this reduction in air change rates to single rooms, is that something you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So let's ask you about this meeting, because I think it'd be really interesting to understand a bit more about it. You say, I recall being asked to attend one meeting regarding Brookfield's design solution for the ventilation in general ward bedrooms. There were other members of the project team all in the room, but I cannot recall all present. I recall Mr. Seaborn, Mr. Moyer, and Mr. Hall. I cannot recall the date, but I think it was before contract was signed. Now, the contract was signed on the 18th of December 2009. Do you remember that as an event that you were told about or you're aware of?
I remember the Mr. Seaborn and Mr. Moyer and Mr. Hall going to Shepherd and Wedderman's office. I think they signed that was the legal advisors for the project.
Right, they're taking Mr. Calderwood with them.
I think,
and his pen.
He would have most definitely been there.
Well, he had to sign, didn't he?
Yes. So I remember them going off to that meeting.
So could this meeting have taken? Well, I'm putting words in your mouth. If we then think about the point when the competitive dialogue ended and Brookfield became the preferred bidder, so that was before then.
Yes.
Could this meeting have taken place during the competitive dialogue period, or in the period between Brookfield becoming the preferred bidder and when they all went to Shepherd and Wedderburn?
I can't remember.
Am I in roughly the right time?
I would say yes.
Yeah. So it's possible it's in October, November, December, but you can't say when.
I can't, because I've got no access to any of my emails or anything that's in the board.
And the reason is, I'm then intrigued about why were you at the meeting? Because ventilation is not your field.
That's correct. And I wouldn't have normally been at a technical meeting, but I think given the discussion that we had, I think Mr. Seaborn invited me as a matter of professional courtesy, because there was a lot. I remember that there was a lot of discussion about how many people could be in a ward bedroom at any given time. So I was asked questions: how many nurses would be delivering nursing care to a patient, during the day? How many doctors would be present in a ward round? How often did the ward rounds happen? When would the patient's relatives be visiting? Now, at that point, I think we hadn't moved to open visiting at that point in time. I think we were still sticking to the rules of, we've got afternoon visiting for now and evening visiting, but we were moving towards, because the Scottish Government Health Department were very keen, the patient's relatives were very keen to be able to come up to visit their relatives at any time. So we did talk about what would be the maximum amount of people in the room during the day.
And this would be a nursing question in a sense, because you got the practical experience.
Yes.
And what sort of numbers did you come up with?
Well, we looked at, there's very clear rules around about visiting, regardless of whether it's open or, can drop in at any time. 2 visitors to a bed, even in a single room. So that would mean it'd be 3, including the patient. In a ward round, that was quite a difficult question because we were looking at how the medical staff were going to be deployed within the new hospital. Essentially, we didn't want them sort of, starting at one end of the hospital, working their whole way around and ending up in the other. So the ward rounds that you might see in casualty or whatever don't really happen in real life. You don't have the man in the white coat with 100 people running behind him. We don't have that kind of thing. So it would probably be in a ward round a senior doctor, a consultant, or somebody at a senior level, and maybe 1 or 2 junior doctors. There may be a nurse present in the ward
Maybe a
round,
medical
but not
student.
always. So there could be 4 people during a
4.
ward round. However, in the children's hospital, they then have to put into the mix, we've got mum and dad there, or gran or grandpa, or, other relatives and siblings around. So I think we came up with a sort of average of 5.
But it could be higher than that.
It could be, but not for a long period of time.
No, I understand that. I mean, did you understand why you were being asked?
I was told that there had been basically an instruction from Brookfield that they're putting a new system into the hospital. At that point in time, I didn't know what chilled beams were. Found that out later on. So this was the system that we're putting in. It was to meet the energy BREEAM. It was part of the design to meet that. And there had been some discussion with Dr. Hood, who was our board at the time lead for ventilation, because he had built...
So you were being told of Dr. Hood's involvement?
Yes. He had been contacted for his view, and he had I don't know whether he contacted Mr. Hoffman at HPA, Health Protection Agency down in England, or the board themselves, the project team contacted him, because he was the national expert in ventilation. In fact, I think he was probably an international expert at the time. So he was contacted. So we're given the background of that infection control would not be affected by the number of air changes in a single bedroom in a general ward.
A couple of questions from that. Firstly, Mr. Hoffman gave evidence. If I understand it correctly, he explained that his first involvement with the hospital was in 2011. So you sure his name was being mentioned?
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, did anyone discuss with you obviously Mr. Hoffman's views are mentioned, but did anyone discuss what the Scottish Health Technical Memorandum Guidance says on this topic?
I can't remember if that was discussed at the meeting.
If you've been told...
It's so long ago. I mean, this was 2010.
No, but you remember quite a lot.
I do remember the debate about being asked, how many people would be in the room.
I just wondered if you've been told that what they were contemplating doing was not following the Scottish Health Technical Memorandum Guidance for single rooms in what will eventually be a £700 million hospital. Do you think, how would you have reacted at the time?
I would have taken the advice of the ventilation expert.
Was there a ventilation expert in the room with you at that moment?
No, but I was told that the ventilation expert had been contacted, and that was the advice that he'd given.
Okay. We have over in your statement on the next page, you mentioned Mr. Hood. Now, we have an email from him in 2010, bundle 17, document 79, page 3032. Which is we previously looked at. So unless I've misunderstood, we understand that Mr. Hoffman's position that this is his first involvement, but you were told about Mr. Hoffman's opinion in 2009.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Let's take that off the screen. I think, my lord, this would be quite a good place to break, because I'm going to move on to the design process, although I have covered quite a lot of it already.
Very well. As I said, Ms. McCluskey, we'll take a break for coffee, and if we could try and sit again at 25 to 12, and I hope someone gives you a cup of coffee.
Thank you.
Mr. Mahan.
Thank you, Lord. Now, I want to just correct something I said. We put to you that Mr. Hoffman had remembered certain things, and I need to clarify it. So we put to him, had he been involved in the consultations around the design of the hospital from 2009, and he said he had been involved in consultations, but when we pressed him on when he was first involved, he didn't say 2011, he said 2010. But you're sure that he was mentioned in the conversation?
I'm sure, yes.
Do you happen to remember who it was talking about speaking to Professor Hood?
No, I'm sorry, I can't. I mean, I've told you what I do remember,
Yeah.
and it was really round about how many people are going to be in the room, do you think, Fiona? That was,
And so we've got some people coming up to give evidence. So Mr. Seaborn was there,
yes,
so we can ask him.
yes,
Mr. Moyer was there, but we can't ask him because he's not well.
right.
And you said Mr. Hall was there.
I'm sure Mr. Hall was there.
Well, we can ask him. Was there anyone else you can think of?
There were other people in the room, but I can't really remember who else
No.
was there.
Nobody from not a Mr. McKechnie.
I don't know who that is.
Well, that's probably all I need as an answer. Let's move on to the next topic, which you actually have already discussed most of the design process and your involvement in it. So I won't go over it at great laborious nature, but I want to just check something with you.
Right.
I wonder if we can look at a room data sheet. Now, what I'm going to look at is Bundle 47, Volume 2, page 42. So this is, you spoke about what you didn't, what you had concerns about checking. You went to Mr. Moyer. So this happens to be a room data sheet for a single room in renal, but I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is for the purposes of our conversation. So this is the front page. Is this the bit you said to Peter Moyer you couldn't check? Or is it the next page?
No, not that one, no.
The next page?
Yes.
Right. So if we look at these sections, there's a section on temperature, ventilation, lighting, safety, and then over the page, general notes. So is it all those bits that you effectively, that you said, I can't check this?
Yes.
And what was Mr. Moyer's response to that?
That's fine.
Did he inform you of how they were going to be checked?
No.
Do you know how they were going to be checked?
No.
No. Get it off the screen, please. I'd like to move on to the topic of horn taps, which you cover in your statement on page 27 of your statement, which is page 332 of the bundle. It's question 16. Now, you've given quite a detailed discussion on 16 and on to the next page of horn taps. And you mention how, and actually go on to page 334, that actually you went to Monklands Hospital.
Yes.
And I want to just check so you went to Monklands Hospital, and you met the ICN from Vale of Leven?
Yes, I went to the Vale of Leven with Jackie Barmanroy, so
Right.
there were two separate visits. I went with Mr. Seaborn to Monklands Hospital, and I went to the Vale of Leven. The tap was installed in the theatres in the Vale of Leven. And I can't remember the reason why Mr. Seaborn came with me to Monklands. It may have just been he was available that day and Jackie wasn't. You know, when you go to another hospital, we tend to go in pairs or as a group. You know.
Yes. There's some suggestion of a possible visit by somebody to Fife. Is that something you were aware of?
Jackie and I went to Fife, but that was to look at one point in the project, we were looking at washer disinfectors for bedpan washer disinfectors rather than using the other method whereby we put the cardboard insert of the bedpan into a macerator. So that I don't recall going to Fife about taps. I think
Right,
it
but
was
you definitely went to Monklands and Vale of Leven.
Yes.
Right. And would this have been in 2012?
Yes.
Right. And I want to just, I know it in a sense, why were you involved? We get this off the screen.
I think Mr. Seaborn was keen that somebody from a clinical or nursing background was able to go and look at the taps. We were I mean, the way it happened, we were told that Brookfield Multiplex are planning to install this new style of tap into the hospital in the clinical wash hand basins and in the scrub sinks,
Right.
scrub troughs, not for patient use, for clinical use. It was a completely different design from what I'd been used to. So I was invited to attend a presentation that the director from Horn came along, Mr. Horn himself, and another person. We were given a brief demonstration of the tap, and I think it shows a video. And then Alan asked if what my thoughts were around it, and he said, "Why don't you go out and we'll have a look elsewhere to see them in situ and find out what other people think about them."
And was a paper produced?
Yes, I did that.
And that would be
with Jackie.
with Jackie. Bundle 43, Volume 1, Document 46, page 231. I'm now learning to recognise your formatting for documents.
I know. I've got a certain style, haven't I?
You do have a certain style. Page 231. So this was written in July 2012, it says, and it's you and Jackie together.
Yes. There is another paper that Jackie did separately, and some of the information from that was combined into this report.
So her other paper is earlier than this.
It was round about the same time, because Jackie had done some other sort of investigatory work, if you want to say. We didn't do any formal research as you would, but she did speak to Health Protection Scotland and went to, I think it was an Infection Control Society meeting where Horn had a stall. Often at these infection control meetings, they've got all the people coming in and showing you the latest disinfection methods and giving you freebies, that sort of thing. So she was able to come back and say she'd discuss the taps with colleagues across Scotland, and I think perhaps England too. And it was felt to be, the way forward.
Could we go on to the next page? Do you see how in the benchmarking chapter there's a paragraph that begins, the NHS 5 ICN recently attended a national decontamination meeting.
Yes.
Met a colleague from Portadown.
Yes.
Who was involved in the investigation of the Pseudomonas outbreak in the neonatal units in Ireland.
Yes.
Involved until the death of a number of babies?
Yeah.
Are you aware of an earlier incident in Western Australia?
No. That particular part of the document was written by Jackie. And I think I can't remember, you'd need to ask her this afternoon. I can't remember if she got that information at that Infection Control Society meeting she was at and come back with that information. This is prior to the document then that was issued by Health Protection Scotland and guidance, or was it Health Protection Scotland or on guidance regarding taps. This was prior to that.
But you're clear that Health Protection Scotland's advice was sought?
Absolutely, Annette Rankin. I think the good thing about our project from an infection control point of view was that we'd already worked with Annette, and Annette had gone on to a promoted post within HPS, so we had almost a direct link. We knew her very well, so she was very approachable and very helpful to us.
One of the things that seems to eventually happen to these taps is that they end up having to have some form of systematic cleaning process.
Yes.
But that doesn't seem to start till 2018.
Right, okay.
And I wondered if you were aware of what the estates team were doing in terms of maintenance of the taps after the hospital opened.
All I know is that when we were commissioning the hospital with a 12-week operational commissioning period, after the keys were handed over, a number of the team moved out of the offices, the porter cabins, into the children's outpatient department, the children's therapy area, and from then we did the work that we were required to do, and my job was clinical migration. But I do know that there was a flushing regime being carried out, and that was through the domestics. Karen Connolly instructed the domestics to run the taps and the showers for a certain period of time.
Because what was also
but I don't know anything about the decontamination or the water treatment. I wouldn't be able to help you with that.
You're not aware of a thermal cleaning system that was eventually produced?
Well, when we discussed the taps initially at that very first presentation, I do recall, I can't remember who it'd be, somebody from our side, NHS, at the meeting discussing how we would thermally disinfect these taps. And the taps, and from my point of view, it was a different technique we had to use, so we had to train the staff to use it differently. But Horn very kindly and very helpfully gave us videos to use in the training for the staff. From the thermal disinfection point of view, I do remember an estates representative, and I can't remember who that was, discussing to save time, they would thermal disinfect a batch of tap fronts, because what you could do with these taps, don't ask me how they did it, you could take the front off without having to go round the back and interfere with the pipe work and swap them over. So the clean tap would be swapped with the dirty tap as such, and it would save time.
And then the dirty tap would then be cleaned?
I don't know how that system worked because I wasn't actually involved in that.
Can you help us about how it was if the system wasn't actually put into place, why that might have been?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Do you have any knowledge about why it was that such a thermal decontamination system didn't start when the hospital opened?
No, because I'd left the project very quickly after.
Was there any discussion about handover of this issue and anything else, frankly, to do with the water system to the estates team as part of the commissioning process?
I wasn't involved in the technical commissioning. Right. I can't answer that.
Ms. McCluskey, you referred to a 10-week operational commissioning period. You could just brief, I think I know what you're talking about, okay. But could you just briefly confirm to me what you mean by that 12-week operational commissioning period?
Okay, the 12-week operational commissioning period is a time where we're getting the hospital ready to receive patients. So during that time, there would be a whole raft of work being done under the technical umbrella, under estates, preparing the water, the lighting, the heating, etc. The heating would be running, to make sure it is operating correctly. From the clinical commissioning point of view, we had a training programme for the staff who are going to come into the building. They were inducted, orientated and trained. We use a cascade approach for that. We brought the equipment over to pre-equip the wards and departments prior to the patients moving in, because when you move a patient in, you want the ward to be ready for them, all the beds, all the accommodation to be ready, the staff to be there to be able to receive them. During that time, the hospital, I suppose from a layperson's point of view, would not have perhaps looked finished. I remember we ran a few sessions with the public. We did some wayfinding with them because it's such a large hospital to get their feedback. And I can remember one lady coming in and saying, "Oh my, this place doesn't even look as if it's ready," because they were coming into the atrium where there were guys up in, these high sort of sling things cleaning the high level. There were shop fitters in shop fitting, Marks and Spencers and John Menzies and the cafes, etc. So that was all going on at that particular point in time prior to the patients moving in. So when it was quite a short period of time, because we also had to fit out, I wasn't really involved in this, Mary was involved in the science centre, came into the children's hospital to put in all of the play equipment in the in the children's atrium. So it's like getting a new house. You buy a new house and then you have to learn how to work the microwave, the oven, get the new beds and, get your carpets in. That's really, I suppose, at a very basic level, what operational commissioning would be. It's getting the hospital ready for service day one.
Thank you.
I wonder if I can show you an email. Well, firstly, I'll ask a question about, I hope I don't show it to you. We found a project management group meeting from July 2012. You're not in the meeting, but it talks about screaming taps after they've been disinfected. Any memory of that being discussed?
The screaming taps related to the armated shank taps.
So not the horn taps.
Not the horn taps. The armated shank taps were used in patient areas. You'll probably see them a lot in, public toilets with the disabled lever that you use.
Well, if it's not horn taps, I'll
No,
move on.
it was related, I think, to a faulty batch.
Okay. If we can then look at
horn.
an email sequence, so it's bundled 43, volume 1, document 47, page 234. Now, you're only copied into this, and I do realise copying into emails is a problem, and I mean, one doesn't have to be quite as brutal as Miss McLeod was, that she doesn't read the ones that she's not copied into, but I appreciate that. So this is the 6th of August 2012, and it's an series of emails between Jackie Barman-Roy, as she had just become, and Mr. Hall, and you're copied into the whole sequence. And if we go down to the bottom of this page, we see that Mr. Parry was involved. Could he have been the person you were talking about who was involved in the horn taps issue?
I can't remember if he was at that actual meeting, but he became very involved in all estates issues when he came over to the project team. He'd been working out of Glasgow Royal Infirmary for quite a while, inputting to work, but eventually came over and based himself in the offices in the porter cabin. But I can't remember if it was him that was at the meeting about taps or whether it was somebody else. But whoever it would have been at that meeting, I'm sure would have reported back to him because he was the lead.
Thank you. What I want to do is move on to various emails, some of which we may well have already looked at, but I think I'll just walk through them just to catch up. Bundle 14, please. Volume 1, document 2, page 32. So this is an email in 2013 from Miss Ioannidis, from Miss Ioannidis to Mr. Walsh and Sandra McNamee, describing a meeting that she had had with Craig Williams, Jackie Barman-Roy, you and Marion McLeod. And I wondered if you can remember this meeting and what's going on at it, and why there's discussion of infections and isolation rooms.
I can't really remember the meeting, to be quite honest, but it looks like, from what I can take from there, is that Pamela was the lead nurse for infection control at York Hill, and at that point would have been when, I don't think that happened when they moved over. I can't remember because another lady eventually came into post, but Pamela was to be the operational infection control lead from nursing perspective in York Hill, and she would be moving into the new children's hospital. So she was clearly looking for advice on, or help. What we would have done at that meeting is probably taken the 1 to 200 drawings or the block plans along and shown Pamela, this is how the patients will come in through the emergency department and will go up to critical care, etc., whatever she was looking for. But I can't remember why we discussed the ventilated isolation rooms. Perhaps it was just to go over old ground that we'd done before.
The reason I asked
I don't really, to be honest, I don't really remember the meeting.
The reason I ask is because there's a later email on the 3rd of July 2014, which is from Fiona McCluskey to Craig Williams, Sandra McNamee and Tom Walsh. It's on page 80 of this bundle. And it says, Fiona McCluskey has sent me the lobbied room details for the new hospital. And she's got an explanation of the decision-making process around changes. See below on lobbied isolation rooms. Now, what concerns me, Ms. McCluskey, is that you have explained that you don't have technical knowledge about the different sorts of isolation rooms. And in this email and the previous one in 2013, there's discussion of how many isolation rooms there are to be, but what there isn't is a statement of which are positive, which are negative, and which are positive preservative ventilated lobby rooms. And one gets the impression that Professor Williams was, I'm sure surprised might be the right word, but perturbed or surprised to discover what they turned out to be in over 14 into 15. And I wonder, is there any way you can think of, would he have seen the room data sheets by this point?
I don't know.
Because what looks like is you're giving him information, but it's not complete information. Do you see why I'm concerned?
Yes.
And so, were you aware of whether there was any system to ensure that the lead ICD knew exactly what sort of isolation rooms were going into the hospital, other than your emails and Miss Yandy's emails?
I think, as I tried to explain earlier, and maybe I've not made myself clear enough, Jackie did have a direct link into Craig Williams very early in the project, and that my understanding is that there was a discussion around about ventilation systems and these rooms, but I wasn't at the meetings, so.
But do you see why it might be a concern
can't really
that
help.
you're reporting a list of rooms without saying what sort of rooms they are? And then Professor Williams, I'm not saying Professor Williams couldn't have asked. I'm not placing sole responsibility on you, but I'm just looking at a communication system that in this case seems to be providing a partial information. And I wondered if you knew whether there was any system that would make sure he knew what sort of rooms they were.
I would have thought he should have known what rooms they were, because he was involved at an earlier stage.
Understand, thank you. I'm going to jump ahead to, I'll check it's necessary, to page 162. So this, I think, might be the email you discussed with us earlier about the use of rooms for infectious diseases patients from the Brownlee. You're nodding.
Yes.
It is the same. That's helpful to get that. So what was going on in this one, just so we can have it all in one place?
At this point, we had received information from the Emergency Care and Medicine Directorate that they were looking to move the Brownlee Centre into the new hospital, which had quite a lot of implications for the way patients were being treated, etc. Because they had a specialist unit there at the Brownlee. And then the reason behind it, my understanding was that when there was a review of critical care services across NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and it was looked to step down the intensive care facility at Gartnavel and consolidate that onto the new site. But I don't really know a lot of the detail behind that, because I think some of it was to do with medical workforce planning. And at that point, the Brownlee, I think, were concerned that some of their higher risk patients who required intensive care support would be left at a disadvantage not having an intensive care unit on site. So there was a request made and agreed at chief executive level that this unit would move across. So this is the beginning of the emails to start the discussions
to basically
around
work out whether they can do it.
Yeah, how we're going to do this, because we're going to move them into a general ward. How's this going to work?
Yes, the question is, will that work?
Yes,
Right, and I'm not going to get into that with you. It's not your field.
right.
But what I'll do is I'll
Thank
jump
you.
on to an email sequence at page 170, please. So this, it's in the wrong order, which is sort of slightly confusing. So the best thing I think to do is to work backwards. So at this point, the email thread starts or ends on the 16th of September 2014 with Dr. Inkster sending the CDC guidance to a group of people. And from her evidence, she's primarily sending it to Craig Williams. I'm assuming you wouldn't have read the CDC guidance before you got this email.
No,
No. Did you read it when you got the email?
I can't remember.
Right. The reason that it seems important is if we just look at the work backwards in this conversation. Do you see this email from Craig Williams to a lot of people at the bottom of the page, 21st of August, 14 in the morning? He wants a meeting, right? And he's inviting various other people. And then we go to the next page. You've sent him an email to which he said, this is the one he responds to. I've spoken to our technical advisors, and they will be keen to meet with yourself and the technical team from Brookfield so we can clarify. Perhaps it can be done at the same time as the meeting with Shahalian, or is this more urgent? Now, who were the technical advisors you were proposing to arrange a meeting with?
I think at that point I would have spoken to David Hall, who would have brought in the people that would be required.
Did the meeting take place?
I can't remember.
If I put it to you, there were no technical advisors at this point, according to Mr. Curry and Brown. How would you react to that?
I'm surprised at that. I thought there would be.
Okay. And then there's an earlier email to you from Mr. Williams, Dr. Williams, sorry. And he's explaining he needs an assessment at the bottom of the page, 20th of August, 14, so the previous morning. I need an assessment for the design team to ensure me that the rooms meet the specification described in the earlier email. And he says that's because the Brownlee is moving to the south, so all of our MDR-TB patients would matter. What are MDR-TB patients?
Methicillin drug-resistant tuberculosis.
They're quite infectious.
I'm not an expert.
Fine.
So
Okay.
yes, I would say.
Next page. Let's go to the next page. And you say, and this is an email you sent on the 20th of August. I have attached the ADB sheet, which describes the references to the mechanical ventilation of the room. Hope that helps. Where would you have got the ADB sheets from?
I would have gone to Frances for that. Frances kept all the master copies. She had we did have a system called Aconex that we used that you could search for a drawing. However, Frances had all the signed drawings and folders.
Okay, there we go.
Hard copies. So I
Bottom
would
of the
have gone to her.
page. Dr. Williams asks you on the 20th of August, dear Fiona, thanks. I could just go double check that the lobbied side rooms meet the specifications contained in. He then refers to a 1998 document on tuberculosis. And you send him an ADB sheet. So I'm assuming you're sending him an ADB sheet for a side room with a lobby.
Well, from what I can see, yes, that's what he's asking me for. I wouldn't have been able to answer that.
No, I'm not saying you would.
Craig Williams is the expert in that. So all I was able to do, trying to assist the process, is ask a colleague, can you give me this? Point me in the right direction.
So she gives you what she thinks is the right sheet.
Yes.
And she sends it to him. And he said,
I don't think Francis sent it. I would have sent it. If it hadn't been Francis, it would have been Peter.
But you
one
got
or the
it.
other. Yeah.
And you sent it to him, and he says, if we go back to the previous page, he says, thanks for the information. I need an assessment from the design team.
Right.
Okay. So would it be fair to infer that when he gets the ADB sheet, he's not immediately reassured? Would that be a fair inference?
Possibly, yes.
Possibly. If we go back to the next page, that's page 172. And the following page 173, the email that you sent him at the start of the thread, I can confirm there are 10-room lobbies within the critical care unit and 2 rooms of lobbies in the renal acuity wards. Now, does that suggest he must have asked you a question offline, which you're then responding to?
I can't confirm that, but that may have happened. Most of the I didn't really have any offline discussions, I don't think, with Dr. Williams. Everything was done on an email because he wasn't with us in the same office. So correspondence would generally have been by email, unless he maybe called me. I can't remember.
Because the thing that I'm concerned about here is that one way to read this thread is that when you send that ADB sheet to Professor Williams, he realizes, because it says it, that the room has been designed in compliance with HBN 0401,
Right.
which is a particular type of isolation room,
Okay.
which says in its documentation it's not suitable for highly infectious patients.
Right.
Now, I'm not expecting you to agree with that, but that's what I'm putting to you as a possibility. You've emailed him in both of the previous 2 years, and so has Jackie Stewart, with information about isolation rooms, but they don't say what sort of isolation rooms they are. Is it a reasonable inference that when he got in touch with you at this point in 2014, he didn't know what sort of isolation rooms they were? Because otherwise he wouldn't have had to ask you.
I would have thought at the earlier period that Dr. Williams was involved and would have known. I'm very surprised that at this stage that the lead infection control doctor for NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde did not know what kind of rooms were being put in the building.
Well, indeed. But you're not aware of any structured process in the design process in 2010 and 11 whereby he was signing off rooms, or he was approving those room data sheet pages or anything like that. You're not aware of a system.
I wasn't involved in those meetings, so I can't.
Well, I appreciate that, but you remember you went to Mr. Moyer and said, I can't sign that page off.
That's right.
And you didn't ask who was going to. But I'm just wondering whether you're aware of any information in that team, because you're all in an office together,
Yes.
of there's a technical process out there.
I assumed that took part in the technical meetings.
Yes, because did you attend the technical meetings?
No, I wasn't part of that group. I think I explained earlier this morning that we had a range of groups across between Multiplex and the NHS project team. We had our own separate meetings, so did they. But I was attached to, I can't remember, there is a... I'm
going to try and find that, because I think it's probably quite helpful.
It shows you who was attached to each meeting. So it would not have been relevant for me to attend a technical meeting. I don't have the technical
I do appreciate
background or knowledge for that. My expertise was best placed in amongst medical planning, clinical migration, training and development, workforce planning. That, I've given you quite a long list of things that I was involved with on the project. Sorry, I'm speaking over you, I apologise.
I think, Mr. McIntosh, do you want to try bundle 30, page 50?
I am deeply grateful, my lord. I was just foolishly looking in bundle 40.
No, I may be wrong, but do you want to try that?
Yes, I think that'd be a good idea. Yes, there we are. Is this what you're talking about?
Exactly, yes.
Right.
That's
so let's just recap. The meeting you think might be involved in this is the technical design group in the middle in yellow, but you weren't there.
That's correct.
Brilliant. Well, that's really helpful. I will move on. I think there's then a meeting, and we have, well, this is much later on. Could we look at, back to volume 14, volume 1, page 180? So this is an email. We go to page 181, actually. So, no, I'm going to have to just make sure I've got the right page. Yes, sorry, please go back to page 179. So this is an email in which discussions are being had about holding a meeting between David Loudon and Craig Williams and Tom Walsh. And the reason I'm showing it to you is because of an earlier email in the thread, which is on the next page, 180. And it's Craig Williams emailing David Loudon. Dear David, at the last Board Infection Control Committee, I was asked by Jennifer Armstrong to contact you to find out where we are with information for the project team about lobbied side rooms in the hospital. So he's clearly asking questions. Sandra McNamee and I met with Fiona McCluskey and a ventilation expert from the project team several months ago to discuss two things: whether the lobbied side rooms meet the current guidance for housing bone marrow transplant patients, and whether the lobbied side rooms meet the DH guidance for housing MRTB patients. Now, what intrigues me about that is it may well be the meeting you were trying to set up in the previous thread, and I wondered who the ventilation expert from the project team might have been.
I can't remember the meeting, I'm sorry. I don't know who the ventilation expert from the project team would be, because we didn't have a ventilation expert on the project team. That would have been somebody externally that would have been brought in.
But you can't remember who it was?
I can't remember who that would be.
Right.
I can't remember the meeting. I'm sorry, I can't really help you with that.
Let me just make a note of this. Right. What I want to do now is to put something to you that Professor Williams has said in his evidence. I think we gave you on the document list a reference to his transcript. Did you have a chance to look at it?
Yes, if you could tell me which one it is again, please.
It's Professor Williams' transcript, columns 110 to 111.
Which bundle is that in?
It's not in a hearing bundle. It's in a transcript bundle. If we go to
Oh yes.
page,
Right.
it'll be
Hold on.
it's column 110 to page 55 or thereabouts.
Yep.
Next page. Yes. Do you see on the right-hand side, Lord Brodie asked a question. And if we go back to the left-hand side where it says Mr. Connell, basically what's happening is that Professor Williams is being shown a minute of the AICC. At the top of the page, he says he sent an email to Fiona McCluskey late August, early September, and he hadn't received a reply. And then at the bottom of the page, it's put to him, you record in 99, from his statement, that Dr. Armstrong had stated the issues over MRTB patients and bone marrow patients should be resolved prior to the opening hospital. You note, however, we do need this provided with the validation certificates. And he responds that it relates to the positive pressure ventilated lobbies outside the bone marrow treatment units, and whether they're protected outside the bone marrow treatment unit. And then he goes on further in the column that he still hadn't heard from you. And then over onto page 111. Again, this discussion of the minute. And what I wondered for you is it the case that Professor Williams was chasing you for information about the specification of these rooms and their validation certificates?
I think if we go further back into
you want to go to what? 2 pages back?
If we go into page 112 of his evidence.
Oh, here we are. We have it here.
If you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
Where he says, I think we asked the project team member to come specifically to provide.
So which column are we on here?
Column.
Numbers at the bottom.
Oh, right. That would be 111.
111, sorry, thank you. Oh, at the bottom of the page, answer, I think we asked, yeah.
Okay. I think we'd asked the project team member to come specifically to provide an update of what was going on with the hospital, the validation and things like that. They came to the meeting and again, restated that all building was being done to HTM 0301 standards. That's actually factually incorrect.
Right. So let's just break it down. So which bit of it is factually incorrect?
Right. I was asked to attend the Board Infection Control Committee meeting on October the 1st. And I've got I think we looked at the
Let's go in steps.
infection control update that was given at that meeting.
So what I was just doing is, before we go there,
Right.
remind us of the date. Bundle 13.
It was the 1st of October, 2014.
I'm just taking a moment to download. So that's the 1st of October, 2014.
Yeah, I've got it in, I think it's bundle 27, volume 8, document 3.
It is. Bundle 27, volume 8, document 3, please.
Right. Okay, I was asked to attend, I wouldn't normally have gone to a Board Infection Control Committee meeting. Sorry, do you want me to hang on and wait?
No, please, I'm just playing page number catch up with you at the moment.
This is not a meeting I would normally have attended, but I was asked to give an update on the infection control input to the project team, into the project team and the project in general.
So this is when you present this paper?
Yes.
So we're on page 39 of bundle 27, volume 8. So you're presenting this paper to the board, right?
Yes. I wasn't asked to give an update on ventilation. I was specifically asked to let the Board Infection Control Committee know what infection control had been doing to help in the project. And there's a table 1, page 41, behind that.
Yes.
That was Pamela Ioannidis and Jackie Barmaroy very helpfully pulled that table together because they had been doing a lot of the work. So that was what I tabled at that meeting. I wasn't asked about ventilation at that meeting. If I had been asked about ventilation at the meeting, I don't recall. If it's in the minutes, I would have been. If I was asked, I would have gone back to David Hall or Peter Moyle and told them, this is what's happened. I need that information, or the infection control doctor needs this information. That is my recollection of that.
So let me just, it's rather helpful because I was going to come to this document. So
I just to finish off, if there'd been a request to give an update on ventilation at that meeting, I would have taken somebody from technical along with me.
I'm going to take you to the minutes in a moment.
Sorry.
But what I want to do is
Jump
just...
the gun here, I'm sorry.
No, I realise you're giving lots of helpful information. Let's stay with page 41 for the moment, because I was going to come back to it. We can do it here now. So you present this paper to the meeting on the 6th of October, and this is a list of interventions by the IPC team.
Yes.
Now, one of the striking things about this list is, apart from Dr. Haig's involvement in infection patient inflows in October 2013, there's no mention of infection control doctors in this document.
No, because I was given a nursing update.
Yes, but if you go back 2 pages to page 39, it's headed Update on Infection Control Input. So why wouldn't a reader assume that you're also going to cover the input by Dr. Williams? And actually, if you go back to page 41, it goes back so far that you could probably pick up Dr. Redding's involvement in that meeting in May 2009. So why are they not in here?
Why are who not in here?
Why are you not? Is there not a row that says meeting to discuss adult hospital infection isolation rooms 2009, Annette Rankin, Dr. Redding? Why have you only limited it to nurses?
I think I stated earlier on that I asked Pamela Ioannidis and Jackie to help with this because they had all that information. So they produced the table for me.
Wouldn't the infection control team also have records of the involvement of its doctors in these matters?
I can't answer that.
Because I'm just wondering why this is an incomplete report if it doesn't mention the work of the lead ICD.
No, it doesn't.
But you can't help me about why that is.
I'm sorry, no.
No, okay. Let's go to the minute, because I think it's very helpful if we did that. Bundle 42, Volume 1, page, document 68, page 350. Page 350, please. $350. Thank you. So you are recorded as being present for item 2.
Yes.
And let's look at the minute. And you, the item is called Update on New Build Project. And it summarizes to a great degree in the involvement of infection control in the project. Now, on the next page, do you see Professor Williams asked Fiona if there had been any update with regard to the technical view of the transplant side of things was being looked at. Fiona said she will check this and report back to Professor Williams. Dr. Haig stated she's not seen any minutes of discussion that took place at the flows of emergency paediatric patients for infections, and you said you will forward notes to the meetings. And then there's a discussion of the adult infectious diseases patient process. And you see there's a reference to Professor Williams making reference to the need for a massive airflow change in the second paragraph, 4th and 5th line.
Yes.
Second and third line from the bottom. Now, and Dr. Armstrong asked maybe if IDU should stay at Gartnavel, but Dr. Seaton said this will be adequate for managing the patients. Is this a note of Professor Williams effectively saying that these isolation rooms are unsuitable because the airflow is in the wrong direction?
I wouldn't be able to answer about airflow being in the right or wrong direction. All I can remember from the Brownlee move was that there was a meeting in the Brownlee Centre seminar room earlier than this. Can't remember the date. There will be a minute of the meeting somewhere in the papers. I was asked to attend that meeting on behalf of David Loudon, and because I had a knowledge of the hospital tower as much as anything, and I was told to tell the doctors at the meeting that the wards at that point were built, some were closed off, ready to go. We didn't actually know which ward this group of patients would be transferred to in the hospital, but I do have a note where they did actually go in the end. I think it was
They went to 4.
they went
5C
to
and D.
5C.
So the question
in the
that I
hospital.
think need to press you on is, so you're saying that this minute doesn't reflect Professor Williams' evidence about what you said at the meeting?
I wasn't asked to give an update on ventilation. I would have, if I'd been asked to give an update on ventilation at that meeting, that would have been a different paper, and that would have been, I would have gone with somebody from Peter or perhaps David, who had that knowledge. I wouldn't have been able to answer the questions on ventilation.
Can we go back one page, please? I don't know whether you can help me, but it just intrigues me that the coordinating infection control doctor is at the meeting. Why isn't he giving a report on the infection control involvement in the new hospital? Why are you, who's not even a member of the infection control team?
Exactly.
What's the reason?
I don't know.
Well, you went to the meeting, you sat there, and he wasn't giving the paper. Did you not think of asking somebody, why am I giving this paper? Why isn't Professor Williams giving it?
I think some of the reason behind being asked to go to this meeting was related to operational commissioning, because I was at that point very keen that the infection control nurses continued to have involvement through the operational commissioning period, and I needed help, particularly around some of the work that was done with the dispenser strategy. So I wasn't there to discuss ventilation.
No,
and,
I appreciate that,
so
but you weren't there to discuss the role of infection control nurses in the dispenser strategy there. You were there to present this paper.
absolutely, yes.
And what I'd like to understand is why or whether you discuss with anybody why that paper is not being produced by either Professor Williams or Mr. Walsh, who are both in the meeting. So the manager of IPC
Absolutely.
is there, and you're there, and Williams is there, but you're doing the paper. Why? Did anyone tell you?
I was doing what was requested.
But one of the possible responses is to say, why am I doing this? I'm a busy person. I've got a hospital transmission to move. Get Tom Walsh to do it. Why did you not say that?
No.
Can you help us about what was going on that caused it to be you who produced the paper?
I can't remember. All I was asked to do was to give an update on infection control, and I used people within the team of infection control to help me with that. And perhaps on reflection, I should have said, no, I'm not giving that. That's Professor Williams who should be giving the update on reflection.
Okay. So what role did IPC eventually have in the commissioning process?
We had Stefan Morton, who was the hand hygiene coordinator. We'd already done a whole raft of work around where the assemblies, that's where the the hand hygiene gel should be situated, where the soap should be situated,
Right.
where the DANI centre is. A DANI centre is a unit that contains gloves and aprons. So it's the PPE that our member staff would put on before they go into a room.
But apart from these practical arrangements, was IPC involved in any aspect of the commissioning that might, for example, have related to the water or ventilation systems?
I don't know, because I wasn't involved in technical commissioning. I was involved in operational commissioning.
I don't understand the difference. What's the difference?
Technical commissioning is what we describe as hard facilities management, the water treatment, the ventilation, the heating, the lighting. Operational commissioning is about getting, as I described earlier, you're moving into a new house. You want to make sure you've got your carpets and curtains in.
But if you move into a new house...
We don't put carpets and curtains into hospitals, but in a basic level, that's what operational commissioning is. It's about getting the hospital ready for the staff and the patients, about training the staff in how the new hospital's going to work. So there was two distinct parts of that, technical and operational, and a subset of that was clinical migration, which was the bit that I led on.
And who would be effectively, to continue the analogy, the person who checks that the electrics are fine, and you've got a gas safety certificate for your boiler, and that there isn't a hole in the roof? Who checks that?
That would be the Secretary of State's manager, who would have been Ian Powrie.
Okay. The final thing I want to ask you about is, we gave you a copy of Mr. Seaborn's email of the 23rd of June 2016, which is bundle 12, document 104, page 813. Now, this was sent by Mr. Seaborn, we understand, after he retired in the summer of 2016, possibly in response to a realization that there'd been this ventilation change had taken place that you were in the meeting about in 2009. And I wondered if you'd ever seen this before.
Not until I don't think I'm copied into
No,
that.
you're not, but
no,
I wondered
I would have been in another job at that point within the board.
Did you have a chance to read it?
Yes.
So taken at the very sort of highest level, what's your attitude to the sort of general approach? Is it broadly accurate? Do you have anything in particular you would disagree with, or what's your comment on it?
The first three paragraphs, I completely agree with. The fourth paragraph, I didn't know anything about temperature or whatever.
Incidentally, remember that meeting in 2009 we talked about,
yes,
when Mr. Hood's call was discussed? Did anyone mention temperature in that conversation?
I think I said earlier, I can't remember.
No, but I'd prompt you again to see if you remember.
I can't remember.
No, fair enough. Okay.
My memory is, as I stated earlier, it was all about how many people are going to be in the room.
Okay. Let's go on to the final paragraph on that page. Is that something you would know about or have any recollections whether it's accurate?
I mean, I'm not an expert on negative pressure, but we were told that the rooms in the general wards, or general ward bedroom, would be at a slightly negative pressure in comparison to the corridor, providing the door was kept closed.
Right.
But the doors are open and shut all the time, so I think it would be more of a balanced. But I mean, I'm not an expert.
Over the next page, is there anything on the remaining part of the letter that you would find that you think is something you'd accept or you disagree with? What's your view on the rest of the letter?
I think I would agree with it all, apart from Penelope Redding's surname spelt incorrectly. Apart from that,
I just wondered about that because there's a sort of timing issue which I'm not sure I understand. Perhaps you can help. When you joined the team, back in 2009, who was the lead infection control doctor for Greater Glasgow and Clyde?
at the time, it was Craig Williams.
Yeah, so if Penelope Redding was involved, it would have been before you arrived.
I don't know. You would need to ask other members of the team. I know that Dr. Redding
Was at the meeting.
Very involved in the project in the very, very early stages, but I'm only hearing that second hand.
Right.
My involvement with infection control doctor was always Dr. Williams, and always all by second hand nature. You know, I wouldn't often be dealing with him directly. It would be via the infection control nurse or others.
And my final question is, just for completeness, is do you recollect when Annette Rankin left the team to go to HPS?
Annette Rankin left the team I started at the beginning of April, and Annette was literally moving out of the office as I was moving in. However, having said that, when she moved to HPS, she came back to be involved in the bidder process.
In the summer of that year?
Yes, and then she was involved in all of the bidders' meetings. And then when we went into evaluation, we went into an office accommodation in Gartnavel, and Annette wasn't there every day, but she would come in a couple of times a week, and we would go over flows or adjacencies or whatever.
So you think she was involved in the evaluation process?
Absolutely, she was there, yes.
Well, thank you very much. Well, that's all the questions I have, but maybe we might want to see if members of the call participants have questions.
Ms. McCluskey, what I need to do now is check with the other people in the room to see if there's any additional questions. So if I can ask that you leave back to the witness room for maybe 10 minutes.
Okay.
Then ask you to come back and we can confirm whether there are more questions.
All right, thank you. Please stand.
You have further questions?
2 questions. Paul.
Yep. I understand 2 questions, perhaps?
Yes, more,
Thank
2
you.
questions. So one is nice and quick. One of the great advantages of this inquiry, Ms. McCluskey, is we're watched on YouTube. And so
Yes.
I think it's probably helpful I put to you that it's Miss Rankin's position might well be that she didn't attend for evaluation at Garden Naval
Okay.
and that she left for HPS by that point. And she was involved in the competitive dialogue, but not the evaluation. How do you respond to that?
I honestly thought she was involved in that, but that's my memory. And if she said she wasn't there, well, that's fine.
Thank you. Right. Can I ask you now to look, please, at Bundle 27, Volume 3, Document 36, page 622. This wasn't in your bundle, but you have referred to it. It's the Chief Executive letter of the 7th of February 2012 on the subject of TAPS and pseudomonas risk. And you mentioned that it had come after you had written your paper on the TAPS. It appears to be dated some months beforehand, in February. Should you not have reflected the contents of this Chief Medical Officer's letter in your paper?
On reflection, that should have been included in the paper. However, that particular part, I think I did say that earlier on, of the paper was written by Jackie Barmanroy.
So this was a joint paper, you laid it out?
Yeah, we did it together. So the infection control aspects of the paper were written by Jackie, and the nursing, the usability of the TAPS was written by me.
Well,
But
there's
yes,
also a reference.
Yeah, you are correct. That should have been included.
And also, do you see how in the first paragraph there's a reference to an S-bar on pseudomonas and water?
Right.
Is there any particular reason that's not been mentioned in your paper?
I don't know.
So the reason I mention this is because it might be said by some people that an opportunity was missed in 2012 to decide not to purchase the Horn Optitherm taps, and therefore the difficult decision in 2014 of whether to use them would have been avoided. Could it be that the failure to mention the Chief Executive's letter in the discussions in 2012 was part of a missed opportunity to address this issue?
I think if you reflect on that, you could say yes. However, what I was asked to do was to do a quick benchmarking exercise to look at the usability of the taps in relation to what other type of tap would be put in. We were given the option of these taps. I don't know if we were given another option. I don't recall. I think we were just, this is the tap we're intending to put in. Are there any reasons why you wouldn't put them in? And you're correct in saying, I would agree with you, that CL 03 2012 should have been referenced in that.
Because it's a reason not to put these taps in, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
I would.
I've got no more questions, my lord. I was proposing that we might start the afternoon a little earlier at 10:02 if CPs are willing.
We'll do that, but Ms. McCluskey will not be involved. Not be involved. Your question is now finished, Ms. McCluskey. You're free to go. But before you do that, can I express my thanks for the work you've put in responding to the questionnaire in order that we can put together a witness statement, and also for your attendance this morning and engaging with our process and answering questions. I appreciate that involves risk, involves work, and a willingness to help the inquiry. And I appreciate that. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Right, we'll sit again at 10 to 2.
Yes, ma'am.
Stand.